September 18th, 2019. All commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioners Cabe, Kiernan, and Moreau Cook, whom are all absent and excused. Now is time for any public comments for anything not on the agenda this evening. Is there anybody in the audience who has anything for, okay, it does not look like we have anyone in the audience who wants to public comment on something not on the agenda. There are no minutes to approve, and we do not have our council liaison here, so we'll just skip that, correct? Okay. And with that, we will go ahead and dive right into the public hearing. Downtown Public Space Code Amendments, and will be led by Dave Boyd with the City of Bothell staff.
Thank you, and good evening. I have a brief presentation. This is going to be going back over some of the things that were presented at the July 17th public hearing, since this is a continuation of the public hearing, just for the record, and also since it's been a while since we did meet on this subject. So starting off, I just wanted to again reiterate the basis for these public open space requirements, and the basis for that is in the community vision portion of the downtown plan, the comprehensive plan portion, or part of the comprehensive plan portion, that lays out the vision for a sequence of unfolding spaces that inspire people to walk and to linger in the center of the city. And then on the right here on the screen is an early concept plan for how downtown might develop. And on the lower left is the network of public spaces from that section of the downtown plan that shows the idea of this interconnected network that includes some of the main street rights of way, and not just parks spaces. It also includes some private open spaces as well as public parks. And when you get into the development section of the code, the very first diagram you get to in the detailed regulations is this one that does have the reference to open space regulations there in the site development regulations. So these are meant to complement the primary public open spaces and to be built with development or through in lieu fees. So this is just a recap. I'm not going to read through all this, but the basic thing is that they're based on the number of dwelling units or commercial area. There are size minimums in the code. As I said, they're built with development or through in lieu fees. They are to be publicly accessible and connected to public rights-of-way and sidewalks, visible from surrounding streets, with various requirements and guidelines for elements like walls, fences, and furnishings. We've amended the code to allow that the public open space, if it is required to be one open space, it can be bisected by other open areas like a driveway, and I'll show you an example of that here shortly. In 2018, as part of the downtown code amendments, we made some fairly minimal amendments to this, the requirements that are shown here, and what we're doing now is getting into it a little more in more depth to address some other issues that those amendments didn't quite get to. So some examples that we can come back to during the discussion if you wish. The 104 and 6 Oaks, two developments done by Main Street Properties, and because they were being done in the similar time frame, they had a greater open space requirement on the 104, which is in the upper right, and than they did for the 6 Oaks project, which was largely in the downtown core, which doesn't have an open space requirement. And they asked for the ability to transfer some of that open space to the 6 Oaks project, and were granted that ability. And so at the 104, there are courtyards along the north side and the entry court on the west. at Six Oaks, there's the Grove of Oaks on the southeast corner, a dog run and rain garden on the west side, along with a plaza area near the rear entrance. And then also, I put in this slide of the front street just to show that that is one of the streets in that downtown, that network of public open spaces that is identified as part of that public realm that contributes to the open space, even though it is a street right of way. Other examples, this is the Addition Apartments. Here they created their open space along the north side of the building, and it goes over the mostly subterranean parking garage, and the grade slopes down. So at one end, they did build stairs up, and they told the story of two houses that were on the site that they demolished for this site, and a church that was there that burned down previously in this historic interpretive sign at the top of the stairs, and we had them put it in that location on purpose to help draw people into this space. Some other examples, the Health Point, they had a fairly small open space requirement and were allowed to basically expand their entry court and as part of that. Similarly, the small developments along the north side of 185th are projects that are smaller and are likely to use, at least in part, the in lieu fee. And one question that we've discussed is whether the in lieu fee should only be allowed for smaller projects. Another example, actually similar to the Addition, is the Merck. Again, the open space sits over their partially submerged parking garage, a portion of it, and this is the example that led to that code amendment. The driveway comes through between these two parts of the public open space, and we did allow that to happen and made the code amendment to make that explicitly allowed. Different example, townhouse developments like Dawson Square and the Landing have been using passages that provide connections through the site. In the case of Dawson Square, it connects to the park to the south, the volunteer park, and on the east-west access to the library, and to the adjacent project to the north, the Landing. The POP project that's going up, in fact nearly finished, on the south end of Pop Keeney Stadium. They proposed the VUNERF that we've discussed, the mixed garage access and pedestrian space with special paving and amenities to make this welcoming to pedestrians and to keep the speed of the cars down to a safe speed. It's a Dutch concept that has been used successfully in places, and then that connects through the backside of the project over to Half Acre Park, or Horse Creek Plaza as we're calling it now. And they proposed and were allowed to use this second level terrace as part of their public open space. Their original proposal also included a piece on the corner, and they've since leased that ground floor to a daycare and are going to use that for their private, for their outdoor play area. And we're allowing that because they did have enough square footage with the other spaces, but we're requiring that if the use changes, that revert to public open space. In the bottom left corner here is a diagram that shows the amount of public open space relative to the Horse Creek Plaza, to the right, the required open space and the bright green, and relative to the size of the parcel here. Similarly, this project that I presented in July is for a proposal for the 1,400 block of 185th on the north side across from the 104. This is a diagram I did over an earlier proposal to show what it would take to make for that proposal to meet the public open space requirement for the downtown transition district, which is 150 square feet per unit compared to 100 square feet per unit in the downtown neighborhood district. So it included a passage through the building so that the open space on the backside would have an outlet through to the open space in the front. Developer has since provided this. Oh, and something happened here. I'm not going to try to fix it on the fly, but similar proposal for open space that does connect through the building, but it's still, in this scheme, it gets skinny down to the point where it's only about half of the required open space. Included in your packet and the main new information to discuss tonight has to do with the amount of open space that we required. And I've made some minor modifications to these charts that I borrowed from Makers Architecture and Urban Design. They did these for projects that they're doing in Mount Lake Terrace and Issaquah, dealing with public space requirements. And what I've highlighted here in the boxes with the dashed red outline are some of the other requirements. Seattle has a requirement of 5% of the gross residential floor area for open space. Redmond has a requirement of 50 square feet for private open space, such as balconies, compared to our 60. And in the Overlake area, 6.25 of the gross residential floor area. Our requirement of up to 150 square feet per unit, that could apply to a 1,500 square foot townhome, so 10% there, or it could apply to a 600 square foot apartment, so it'd be 25% of that floor area, and the 60-foot private outdoor space. That was a comparison of multifamily requirements. This is a comparison of urban center requirements. So base in Mercer Island of 3% of the gross floor area, similar to Redmond, and Kirkland has a minimum 15% of the site shall be activated pedestrian-oriented space, and Issaquah, again, 3% of the gross floor area, whereas ours is at 6% of the gross floor area. So issues that we've addressed previously, the change in terminology from public open space to outdoor space as the overall term, which includes designated public space and private outdoor space. Signage, although this packet has revised the proposals based on feedback from the commission, that there was a feeling that perhaps we didn't want to clutter up all of these open spaces with a bunch of official-looking signs. So we feel it's important that they are marked in some way, but the requirement would allow them to use a template, and that we would try to devise that would be as artistic as possible while still conveying the information, but also to encourage them to include it with interpretive signage of the purpose of the open space, say if it's a dog park or a rain garden, or historic interpretive signage like the one on the addition, to incorporate the public open space signage with that. We've talked about hours of operation, no change there, connections to the sidewalk, and the requirement for a permanent easement. The new proposed amendments, as I said, focus on the amount of public space required. And based on the feedback that we've gotten and what other jurisdictions are doing, we are proposing, we've suggested for your consideration and discussion tonight, reducing those requirements by about 3/5 to 2/3, 60 to 67% of the current amounts. We're also proposing potentially a limit on when the in lieu fee option can be used. So reducing the overall requirement so that larger sites can fit it on the site, and limiting the in lieu fee option to smaller sites. And we, in this proposal, have chosen the sites that have a requirement of 3,000 square feet of less, which is also the threshold for a site to be able to divide it into more than one space. So there are other thresholds that could be considered. And then also tonight, we're open to any other suggestions for code amendments that you'd like to see. So with that, I'd open it up for questions or comments. I do have the code amendments available to pull up if you want to refer to them directly. And then after any clarifying questions, you can take public testimony, if any, and I believe we do have some. And then commission discussion, direction, and additional analysis desired. We're not expecting a recommendation tonight, because we would like to take this to the Development Services Stakeholders Advisory Group, and their next meeting is in October. So we're proposing that after tonight's discussion, that you continue the public hearing to November 6th, and that we come back on November 6th with the input that we get from that meeting. So with that, any questions?
Okay, thanks, Dave, for that presentation. Any immediate questions or comments from the commission for Dave? Dave, I guess I have a quick question with regards to the packet on the in lieu fee on your urban center public open space requirement analysis. It looks like we're the only, I mean, there's a couple not applicable, but we're the only, looks like we were the only city that allowed an in lieu fee, the ability for that. Am I correct in saying that?
That I didn't really look into. Let me,
Page 1 of that urban center. So.
in the packet?
Yeah, in the packet, yeah. The comparisons between cities. Oh, I'm sorry, a little further down.
Oh, on the...
There, right
chart?
there, yeah.
One more.
One more, actually, sorry.
Yeah.
Fee in lieu.
Well, yeah, it does. Well, it doesn't say there. The Issaquah cell is blank, so
I guess
it would appear that we are
the only one.
the only one.
Oh, that's at least of the ones that you've compared it to.
And I
Here.
can double check
Okay.
on Issaquah for the November 6th meeting.
Okay. All right, great. Do you happen to know why the city in the past chose to go that direction, to provide the ability to do fee in lieu rather than just have the development community put it on site?
When we adopted the downtown plan, when we were developing the downtown plan, the feeling was that the main reason that we included the in lieu fee option was we anticipated that there would be sites that were smaller infill sites that just wouldn't, the requirement wouldn't really provide a meaningful open space. So rather than have a lot of postage stamp size open spaces, and also on a small lot, it's becomes harder to make adjustments to fit that in. So the main idea was that we would that would provide an option for those small sites. as we've moved forward and as we got into projects that weren't in the downtown core that had a significant requirement, developers did ask to use the in lieu option even on larger sites. And that's one reason why we're taking another look at this and recommending a reduction in the amount and limiting the in lieu fee to the smaller sites.
Wait, so that in lieu fee or the fee in lieu, what are some examples of amounts? Like, how does that work? It's an amount of money that is paid and that's used to create open space, or I should say public space somewhere else in the downtown area?
That was the original idea. We're dealing with some issues around that. We can't use it for parks projects that are in our capital facilities plan, and we're trying to avoid any confusion between our downtown public space requirement and the potential in lieu fees for that, and our citywide parks and open space impact fee, so that we aren't double dipping. That's not part of the code, but it is a good question, and so we're looking at being able to use this to enhance other public open spaces, perhaps with public art or additional furnishings, to do programming in public open spaces, to develop or enhance some of the walking routes that are in downtown and that connect the public open spaces through our public street network. So there are a number of things that we've identified that these fees could be used for.
But the city's collected some already for projects, is that right?
We have collected some and
so what happens with that? Is that
so far, as of now, we're holding those
okay.
and haven't actually spent those, but we're working through developing a program to enable us to use those without being running foul of other restrictions that we might have.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Anybody else? Mr. Peiser.
Quick question. Maybe I missed it somewhere. I easily could have. The fee that is paid, is that a negotiated fee between the city and the builder developer, or is that a set amount?
The policy that we've been operating under is that the fee should be based on the cost of the land plus the cost to develop the land as public open space. So basically to match what they would have had to have done on site. Since land costs change and development costs change, we adjust that periodically, but that's the formula that has been used.
And so, Dave, it's stated in here in the or just I guess in the memorandum, it says staff is seeking feedback from the commission on reducing public space requirements by 60 to 66%, or did you mean to 60 to 66%?
Yes, 260 to 60%.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I got it right in the PowerPoint.
Okay. It doesn't look like there's any other questions currently from the commission. So I guess at this time we can ask, just to see if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this topic.
And before we take public testimony, I'd like to recognize, I left on the dais an Exhibit 2 for a email and photo that I received just before the meeting from Mark Betcher of Main Street Properties, and also an illustration that I received from Jamie Waltier of Harbor Homes, who is on our speaker sign-up sheet, which I'll bring up to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then this is the time then for public comment. So if there's anybody in the audience who would like to come speak, it looks like we do have two people here. Jamie Walter. If you could just, I guess, state your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments, if possible, to 3 minutes. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Jamie Weltier, my address is 12957 Northeast 203rd Street, Woodinville. Technically in the city of Bothell, but up in the annexed area near Woodinville High School.
Thank you.
I work for Harbor Homes. We're a small privately held builder developer. We build primarily single-family homes. In the Puget Sound area, we recently have gotten into multifamily production exclusively in the city of Bothell. We have 3 projects underway at this time. We've been analyzing all opportunities in the city in the downtown zone. So I thought I'd have some brief comments, particularly on the downtown transition zone. We've analyzed a few projects, potential projects in the area, and we're having a real hard time making them make economic sense. The height restriction in the transition area is at reasonably 35 feet, I believe, which goes to the pier transition from different zones. So no problem there. There's setbacks that we can comply with, but the open space is really taking a whack at our development potential of most of these projects, if not all of them. I provided Dave an exhibit that we wanted to show you, if that's okay. Do you have the copies? Or yeah, let me. Or I can just, if you guys want.
They have-
Oh, you got it. Oh, sorry.
No, but it's great for the
Yep.
for the public to see it on TV.
So this is a depiction of the ground floor level of a 3-story multifamily apartment in the downtown transition zone, just down the street here on 185th. This particular project would require, under the 150 square foot per dwelling unit public open space, 14,250 square feet, effectively 38.5% of the whole project. This drawing demonstrates approximately 65 square feet per unit. Again, this is a 95 unit apartment. So more or less, we feel like it's meeting the spirit of the open space. We're providing a pass-through, which was shown in an earlier exhibit that Mr. Boyd shared. And we just feel like this particular project is a good example of something that makes a lot of sense to do in the city, but we're only getting about halfway on the open space. So I guess my ask would be, consider reducing the downtown transition public open space to more 60 to 70 square feet, allow for some level of fee in lieu, maybe 10%, maybe 20%, that's automatic. Anything else would be at the director's discretion, and establish a specific fee in lieu amount. Those things are all really important to us because we have a feasibility period of time, 60 days, 90 days, where we have to make a decision. And the Bothell's planning and development staff is fabulous. We do a lot of projects in Bothell. But it's hard to get a good read from any jurisdiction in that kind of time. So we really would be hopeful that you guys would consider modifying the plan to have more definitive code that we can count on. And so I just wanted to share that with you and offer if you had any questions of me.
Yeah, does any of the commissioners have a comment or a question for Mr. Walter? I brought it up, and thank you for joining us tonight. I have a question. I live up the hill from this potential development, and just looking at it and knowing the area very well, there's the public open space on the north side of the property. I'm assuming these residences will be, 35 feet tall. It's on the north side. I'm having a hard time kind of wrapping my mind around that being a place where people would use it as a public open space on the north side of a building in the state of Washington. It just seems kind of tight. It'll be dark. I think it'd be really hard to see unless you're coming down 104th, and it's just, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, that's a fair point. I feel like there's two access points that we'd be providing. One would be on 104th Avenue. There would be stairs to it there, a pass through, and then the one on 185th coming through. I think people, I can't speak to being on the north side. I mean, I understand there's a sun component to that, but yeah, I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know.
Carson.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Of course.
One of the questions I have about this development is we've seen a couple of other developments utilize sort of drainage and infiltration areas as public outdoor space as well. Would this site be detention, or what's your thoughts there?
This project is going to be utilizing a stormwater vault. It would be under the driveway on the east side, the northeast corner of the project. It would have a storm detention vault that would then discharge into a public system on 185th that goes south toward the slough.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time tonight. I appreciate your coming by and speaking.
Thank you.
And I'll enter this plan as exhibit number 3.
Exhibit 3, okay. Okay, and it looks like we have somebody else on the sign-up sheet, Tyler Churchill. Did,
The box isn't checked.
oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Okay, my apologies. Is there anybody else in the audience? Okay, it looks like Carrie Westerbeck's here. Carrie, if you could state your name for the record, address.
My name is Kerry Westerbeck, 9803 Northeast 183rd Street, Bothell. A lot of people know me already. I'm going to echo a bit of what Jamie said. I'm these days an architect, developer, and a contractor, and I know these codes pretty well now. And I'm glad to see this is going to be maybe reduced. It's being proposed. As I've said before here, Bothell doesn't have a lot of small projects like the one I'm doing, and partly because, like Jamie said, they don't pencil out. I would think, I would consider, if I were you, perhaps even waiving required public open space on really small projects, partly because we need them. Cities that are all Six Oakses and Junctions and stuff, although we needed those, they get pretty homogeneous, and right now that's what pencils out. We should be trying to get these nice little infill buildings like you got on Main Street. We should be trying to incentivize those because people love them. I can't tell you how many people have said they like that I'm doing a small project. It's not a block-sized project. But as well, again, working with City of Bothell is great. They're pretty nice to work with, but man, it's just one thing after another, after another, after another for requirements. Small projects, you already get dinged because you don't get economy of scale. But, you know, there's impact fees. I have to do a latecomer fee, all kinds of things. I'm not here to gripe about that, but it's really hard enough to make these pencil out. Some of these people probably look at and think, oh, they're making so much money, but some might be. Main Street, you know, they probably have a pretty good pro forma, maybe Harbor Homes as well, but the smaller you go, the harder it is. So just consider we're going through some serious hoops to try and get these little projects that the city wants and really should, really needs to make a true urban downtown. The smaller you get, the harder it is to make it work. So, and tied to that, I hear a lot of council members and others lamenting, rent's so high, my adult children can't buy a house here, et cetera, et cetera. It's things like this that are partly why. High minimum parking requirements, impact fees, and required public open space. You'd add those up, one thing after another, after another, after another, and we just kind of throw up our hands and say, it won't work. Well, we can't make these things work. So we need to consider what we could live without to get more stuff built, especially medium and small size projects. And of course, I like the idea of the reduction, but yeah, that was mostly what I wanted to say. I think just echo what I said before. consider those thoughts, and at least we should reduce the requirement at a minimum. But small projects, maybe 5,000 square feet site, size of site, and less, you just waive it. Because then it's like fee in lieu, okay, well, one more thing that makes the project not work. And margins get pretty slim on those. So thanks for listening to me.
Oh, wait, if you could say, if anybody has any questions or,
Sure.
you mentioned like a lot of, I walked by your project that people comment that they like it.
Yeah.
So was there a particular public space requirement on your?
Yeah, I've got a tiny little, I've got 300 square feet. So it is kind of a joke public space, but it was required. I did put it in.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I will make it a nice little spot, but I just kind of chuckle because I don't know how much people really get out of it.
Okay,
But if you had if you had more small projects, a lot of these places, like in the great cities of the world, they just pop up, you know. There's places you can't build on. People decide they want a certain amount of light to come into a project, and so they keep off the lot line, whatever. A lot of these things, if we just let them happen organically, they'll happen on their own without us forcing them.
okay.
Thanks, guys.
Quick question for you.
Oh, yeah, you bet.
When you were building your 300 square foot
Yeah.
public space, did you consider paying an in lieu fee?
Yeah, it would have been about, I think, $15,000 back when I permitted.
Okay.
But I needed to have some other things in there anyway, like certain separation from the gas meters and some other things. So it actually worked out pretty well. But, you know, the site, the required, well, a public space itself is, I don't know, it's kind of like that one out in front of the medical building over here, which I had no idea was public open space until I saw it in one of these slides. So that was odd to me because there's signs right in the middle. And if it's supposed to kind of be inviting for public, I didn't know I could walk into their landscape and like hang out on their sign. So a little odd to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't know if there's anybody else in the audience to speak this evening. Okay. Well, thank you for all of that public testimony from the development community. We appreciate that for guidance. Okay, well, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and open up for kind of discussion with regards to what staff has brought before us and what we've heard from the development community. Commissioner Kerr, did you have oh, I thought you had some, I thought you reached for it. Okay. Commissioner Fleischman.
I'm kind of at a standstill here. I know you brought up the term useless. I mean, public space, it's just not conducive. I mean, there's tons of spaces here I've noticed to where I did not know. I didn't know where I would hang out there. But on the flip side, you know, on a smaller piece as yours is maybe having a flat fee, whether not 15,000, maybe it's 5, whatever it is, instead of, hey, I can't do this physically without really making it useful. So I'm happy to work with the city, but maybe have a flat fee instead. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but I think there is a happy medium here. I think we can come up with to where specific, you know, properties or lots as yours is, and then the larger ones, you know, I don't want a developer to think they have to do this and just to get by and just, you're running through the paces and it's just not useful. You know, it doesn't really, it defeats the purpose of having a true open space where if you're riding a bike, you're walking your kids, whatever, having a phone call, sit down on a park bench, whatever. I just want to make sure from both sides, it's benefits the city and it benefits you guys as well.
I just wanted to make one point about the usability of the space. We've got a variety of different spaces, and they do need to be connected to the sidewalk, but they don't always need to be accessible to physically walk into. So the Grove of Six Oaks isn't really meant for people to walk into, but it provides an amenity, just having the trees there. And the rain garden also, you don't walk into, but it does provide that green space along the sidewalk. So yes, we'll get a variety of spaces that you can actually enter into and use, and other spaces that will just provide some relief from the built environment and greenery and that sort of thing.
It is difficult too, as you're coming, I think it was 104 where the public space was actually someone's patio area, and there was a group of bushes that separated the public space from the actual patio area. And I personally wouldn't go in there and say, oh, someone's patio, it's, unless there's a sign that would says, public open space, whatever, we're going to call it. You're really walking a fine line there between privacy and public space. Real quick, you may know this or not, when you're buying a property there or a tenant, do they understand what these spaces are? So if they're going down and say, someone's here walking, some random person, that's technically you can do that, but do the tenants actually know what it is? I mean, do you guys make it a point to have the owners say, hey, if you're buying this spot or renting the spot, just know this space here is considered?
That's one reason why we're proposing the signage, so that it is clear. One thing that I've done since the July 17th meeting, I've taken advantage of the good weather to go and eat my lunch in all of these downtown, all the ones that are accessible, just to kind of get a feel for of that interface between public and private. And some of them are pretty close to the private terraces or even just the windows. Nobody shooed me away, but they have varying degrees of comfort level, both from somebody from the public using them and potentially from the private tenants there.
Commissioner Hampton.
Yeah, so I didn't attend the July meeting, but following the June meeting, I took a little walking tour of some of these sites with my wife and a couple of my friends, and they weren't impressed with my walking tour, but I think it was a pretty good exercise because it introduced them who live in downtown Bothell to many new spaces that they had no idea were public spaces, and it raised a lot of questions that we had. One of them, I think it's relevant with this sign conversation, and your slide says it's revised, but are we going to be able to go back and require buildings who have already developed this space to post a sign that reads the hours that it's open or that it is a public space, or has that ship sailed?
I don't know that we can require it, and we haven't really discussed it. I would be somewhat inclined to go back to those property owners and request that they do that.
Would this be something the in lieu fees you've collected can be used for?
Potentially, yeah.
So I'd also love to hear more about the conversation around in lieu fees, because it sounds like we really don't have a good strategy for spending the in lieu fees. And other than just banking them, it doesn't seem like a good policy to collect money when we have no idea how we can spend it. So maybe I misunderstood, your comments there. But the programming sounds like a really good opportunity. Some furniture or some type of enhancements to the space. Would the property owner, and I'm thinking existing properties again, be required to buy off on that, or is it is what it is unless they say okay?
Again, we're limited in what we can enforce retroactively. So if we're looking to enhance existing ones, we would need to work with those property owners. But going forward, what we're trying to do is tighten the requirements and the guidelines for how these are done, and then yes, it's not that we have no plan for how the fees can be used, but we're still developing that plan in consultation with we've been consulting with our parks and legal departments, and we're going to bring in Public Works and our and finance and our tourism coordinator too, so that we can really look at the whole range of possibilities. But we have a number of potential uses identified already. So.
And I would just add to that, it's not like we've collected a huge amount of money so far. I mean, this has been in place for about 10 years now, I guess, but we've only had, within the last probably 2 to 3 years, where we've had any fee in lieu funds that we've collected. So it's not like we have this huge bankroll of funds that we've been collecting over the years. But we are putting, as Mr. Boyd said, we're working now on making sure that we have a clearer strategy in place of how we can use those monies so that we are putting them to good use.
Okay, is that strategy going to be an administrative procedure, or is that going to come back to the commission and have to be blessed by the council as part of this?
That would be more of an administrative procedure, unless there is something that would require us to get the council's approval for fiscal reasons. But at this point, I don't anticipate that would come back through the planning commission, but we can certainly provide you with a briefing on how that comes together.
Okay. It's interesting to note that, you know, many of these, other than Dave having lunch over at the 104, I haven't really seen anybody using these spaces. But ironically, the one public space that I have seen people use that's not a park is at the corner where the building burned down. And I think it was Main Street Property Group came in and put up some painted Jenga, and it strikes, Carrie's point, or that these things kind of happen, organically or just by chance. And so we've required all of these burdens on the developers to provide this open space, but nobody's using it. And we don't have a good strategy for spending fee in lieu or for getting programming or a way to get people there. And then just around the corner, every day my bus goes by there, and many of those days I see people out there with their kids, waiting for a table at one of the restaurants or just walking by playing with those games. And those things, they can work. So I think that we need to look at this like holistically, and before we make any changes and add extra burdens or take away opportunity from our public space, kind of have some of these conversations. I know that we're being asked to make a different decision, but that's just my gut right now. And it just seems like, why would we continue to do something that's not working, that is a burden, and it is slowing down, development that we really need for our communities. He mentioned kids not being able to afford to live here. My son's, graduating in June, and eventually he's going to move out, maybe. And there's no way that he could afford to live in Bothell at that point. So these things are important to me and important to people that I know and I talk to. So it's not just 1,500 square feet here or there. It's our lives and our families' ability to live here. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but that's my comments.
Well, and you've just articulated why we're looking at this again. We've recognized that it's has not been working as originally intended. So we're revisiting that and trying to refine it and perfect it so that we can actually get the types of things that we were looking for in the first place. And again, because of the development that we've had so far, we've had some good useful open space that has been provided in some of the projects, but we haven't had as many that have actually taken advantage of this particular provision or been required to develop under this particular provision, where we've seen a lot of that happening. So it's part of a network, and we're seeing bits and pieces of that network, but it's hard to see the whole picture at this point. So I think the original intent is still a good one, but the execution has not been happening the way that was anticipated, and that's why, as you were just talking about, why we're revisiting that.
Thank you.
Can you remind me who's responsible for keeping these open spaces clean?
These are the responsibility of the property owner, so.
Okay.
One other thing I'd like to reiterate, I think it was in the packet, but one reason why this is becoming an issue now is that many of the early developments in downtown were either in the downtown core, or in the case of the 104, transferred its public open space to a project in the downtown core where there is no public open space requirement. So that's another potential reason for reducing the amount, because as of now, right now, the burden does get shifted to the projects in the downtown neighborhood and downtown transition districts.
I do have one more question, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah,
Bear with
yeah,
me.
keep going.
The the graphic you showed in the presentation, Dave, with the Dawson Square, showed some passages between the buildings. Would those passages be necessary to access units? Is there, I guess, so that looks like it's the back of the unit, so there's another access off the front or a garage? Or would that be required regardless, just to access the units?
These, I believe, this is actually on the landing north of Dawson Square.
Okay.
But it's similar situation. And they all have entrances off of both sides, but one side is dominated by garage entrances, whereas the main entrance in most cases is from the pedestrian passage
Okay.
or from the street on the street side units.
Okay, and then if a developer wanted to expand the size of the sidewalk, and maybe this is getting too far into setbacks, but would they be able to provide that public open space at grade with a sidewalk and create some type of pedestrian seating shown similar to what they provided with, I think it's the Slater or the Kirkland development here in the attachment here?
Yes, and let's see. The entry plaza for the 104, it doesn't have any commercial space opening onto it, but an earlier version of that, their plans included a kind of a corner store that could have opened onto and spilled into that plaza, which would have made it more actively public. The closest other one that we have is the one near the back entrance to Six Oaks, which has a table and chairs, but no commercial uses that really spill out into it or activate it.
Okay. I mean, I think that type of programming should be encouraged.
Yeah. Actually, maybe a better example is along Popkini Way. There, the Junction project was allowed to develop the public open space, the promenade towards Popkini, and the Boche Court and the landscaping there as to partly meet their public open space requirement. So that's another example. And there, some of the uses along that street, it's not fully occupied yet, but some of them are starting to spill out into that space a little bit to activate that a bit. Yep.
Oh, no, please, no comment, yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes, yes.
I-
Mr. Westerbeck, sure, please.
I just want to say, I'm not just a critic. That Junction public open space really works well. I think it's well integrated with things along there. It's going to enliven that whole edge of the Junction. It's really good design, good urban planning, and I see it used a lot. I know I run around there with my kids sometimes, and I love Boche, so I'll go do that someday. And then the dog park at Six Oaks is heavily used, and there's a couple more I'm trying to think of. So we have some brilliant ones. These actually, I live right by these too, and sometimes we walk through these. They're really pleasant, and I think they'll age well. So, it just points out that you guys were talking about, like the quality of the design. If they're thoughtfully designed, they really can be fantastic. Whereas some, they just look like they were phoned in, and like at the what's it called, the Addition, and then the north side of the Merc. And last but not least, kind of related to that is, seems like those of us who live in the community go that extra mile to. I mean, I'm investing in being here and enjoying all the spaces that I'll end up building. So that can sometimes make a difference what the developer's ultimate goal is. Thanks.
Thank you. I guess something related to that note, I guess the comment is that I also like the slide that we have currently on the projector here and that we're looking at. I tend to like it more, and I appreciate Commissioner Hampton going around and visiting all of this. I need to go around and visit more of the current public spaces that have been created by the development community. I feel like some of the ones that I walk by that I know are public spaces. You mentioned the bocce ball court, which is really fun. I feel like a lot of them are so heavily hardscaped. I would hate to like try to make the development community do something or try to, let them do what they want to do and make it creative and active. But I would sure like to see, and I know some of the ones that are maybe have more vegetation are kind of harder to get to, and you don't really realize that they're public spaces because they have stairs to get to them and they're isolated, and that's what we're trying to address. But I think that's what appeals to me in this particular one right here is, maybe it's kind of a cut through sidewalk, but it's a lot more inviting, I think, than some of the other open spaces. In fact, I was kind of disappointed with the city hall. What we did at the city hall, I feel like it's so hardscaped. It just seems really industrial, and so I hope the development community uses this opportunity to make it a little softer, like this one here. But that's just a comment I have.
Dave, do you have a list of the properties that have open space available? Or
I could certainly put one together. I've kind of just compiled them in the presentation for the most part, but we've covered most of them here. But I could certainly put that in a table.
Okay.
Yeah. With
Yeah, that'd be great.
I would like if you can do an email out so I can personally. I've seen some of these. I haven't personally stood there, which is different than looking at a picture. But I wouldn't mind a list of those sites or those addresses or wherever they're at.
Yeah, I could even include a map so that you can.
That'd be great, Dave.
Yeah, thanks.
Good idea.
I've got a question about sidewalk improvements. I know that we had expressed interest as a commission about the possibility of sidewalks around bus stops and other sort of areas that could attract some people kind of authentically, be improved as part of public space. Was that shot down by legal or?
Well, we did discuss what was originally proposed in the downtown plan was to allow developers to count the sidewalks that they built around their projects towards their public open space requirement. And at that time, it was the Planning Commission and Council that didn't want to allow that. We discussed that with the legal about going back to that as one way, either instead of or in addition to reducing the requirement to allow that. And there was some concern about allowing that for improvements that they would have to do otherwise. Commissioner Hapton's question about expanding the sidewalk, that's something that we do, and so, but we might consider, there are certain projects that expand the sidewalk a small amount just because of the geometry of the site. Not all sites are square, and developers like to build square buildings. So, so those slivers of an extra sidewalk do add to the pedestrian realm, but they're not big enough to meet the dimensional standards for public space. So we could look at that, whether we might provide some more flexible standards for those situations.
I think that's warranted. Thanks.
Another question. The DSSAG, who's involved in that? What is that?
So that's a group that the city staff invites to meet about once a quarter. It's been going on for several years. I'm not sure exactly how long, but we usually have some topics on the agenda, and that's a way for us to communicate what's coming up in terms of code changes or other things that the city's working on. Also a way for us to have conversations with the development community about some of the issues that they've been dealing with at the city. So it has been a growing list. In fact, just this evening I was talking with Mr. Waltier. He was not on the list, so we're going to add him to the list as well. And I think Mr. Westerbeck has been to most of those meetings.
Would there be an opportunity for any of the planning commissioners to be involved in that at all? Just in that meeting, just to give us, to hear about that before our next meeting? I don't know if that's,
For
I
this
know-
specific meeting, you mean, where we're talking about this?
but
My only hesitation is if we have 4 of you, we advertise it as a
Oh,
meeting,
right.
and it takes on a little different content.
yeah, I would hope that it would only be 3 or fewer. So, but anyway, I don't know if even any commissioners here would like to attend, but I just thought,
So why don't we do this? If there is interest on the part of individual commissioners, if you would let me know, we'll give that some thought, and I'll have a conversation with the chair about how we
Okay.
might do that. But certainly, we'll be reporting back to you what we hear from that meeting.
got it.
We can barely get 4 of us here, so probably shouldn't be a problem. But October 23rd is the meeting. Is the committee going to have information about this going into the meeting, or is this going to be a surprise to them that they're going to want to take home and think about and then provide comments? And the reason I ask is there enough time between the October 23rd and I think November 6th Planning Commission meeting for them to provide substantive comments that you're able to process and bring to us?
We'll provide them with some information ahead of the meeting, and then certainly we'll spend some time walking through that at the meeting. And Mr. Boyd, if you could talk about some of the other outreach that you've done to solicit feedback as well. So this is just another part of the process that
Okay.
we've been working on.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've, some of the members have been receiving the packets along, and I've been soliciting input from the development community, and appreciate what we've gotten at the last public hearing and tonight. But that one reason we decided to kind of hit pause or slow down the process was that I didn't get as much feedback as I was hoping to, and the DSAG meetings seemed like a good way to get that. And yes, we can. That was my anticipation, to put together a packet similar to the packets you've received to provide them to inform the discussion. And I think we can take the feedback from that and incorporate it into the packet for the November 6th meeting.
Thanks. And I'm really not trying to avoid agenda item number 7. These are genuine questions.
So as we, I guess, come to the end of this, kind of the end of this discussion, we won't be taking action on this tonight, but one of the things, I guess, a question I have is, since there's been a lot of discussion tonight about in lieu fees, is there a potential, I mean, it's not a code amendment change, would it be to say, I mean, I think it's maybe a worthwhile topic of is to either allow or possibly even do away with the in lieu fee. I don't know if we'll have a chance to discuss that, and I don't know if staff would recommend it or not, but I guess not, because you didn't put it in the recommendations. But since we really don't know what we can do with these fees, but we want to create active public spaces, and if we're going to reduce these requirements, so basically make it so that the development community actually has to produce what we require in the code rather than paying a fee. I guess what I'm saying is, could we do away with that altogether, like some of the other jurisdictions have done?
That is one of the options, yes. So what we're looking for direction from the commission on is whether you want to change the current mechanism we have, which is at the discretion of the director. So any development can request to do a fee in lieu for all or a portion of that public space. And then it's up to the director's discretion whether or not to accept that. So one of the questions before the commission is, do you want to continue that? Do you want to limit who can even ask for the fee in lieu to a certain size? I think that was the way it was
Okay.
phrased in the.
I'm sorry. And
But certainly
yeah.
you have the option, if you want to eliminate that possibility completely, that's up to the commission to
Actually,
make that recommendation.
we'd kind of like to remove the recommendation that I was just possibly proposing, because I actually misread it, and it is just a director discretion. It's not, it's not something that a developer could just pay upfront. It would have to be at your discretion, so.
But just in general, as much direction as you can give us on what's been proposed would be welcome, so.
And can you kind of go to the, I guess I could just kind of turn to the page of the, kind of the big question. Okay, here we go. Thank you. So, yeah, I guess if you could leave this slide here for a bit and just see if any of the commission has, I don't know if we need to go through the packet per se, or I think the slide wraps, unless you have something from the packet you want to refer to, this slide, I think, encapsulates very well, like some of the things that we need to talk about with regards to what we're going to do on November 6th. Does anybody have anything, oh, that's first part's just terminology, we don't deal with that. But I know there was some concern at previous study sessions and meetings about signage. I was one of the people who had kind of problems with it because I don't like to add more clutter to the environment that you see. So I hope that if we do have a sign requirement, I don't really like this one that we're seeing right here from Seattle, I guess it's Seattle. But something that shows there's an open space, a public space, an open public space to be used, but something that's a little, you can see that it is, but it's not as distracting as this. I don't think we just need another sign to put up somewhere, so. But we'll have, oh, go ahead. Commissioner Curd?
Yeah.
Commissioner Hampton?
So one of the things about these new proposed amendments, 60 to 67% of current amounts, I guess that was, we clarified that to be 60 to 67% total. How are we just looking through at the other jurisdictions and comparing ourselves to them to get to that, or how did you land on that? Just testing the waters?
Somewhat testing the waters, somewhat based on feedback that we've gotten and what developers have done in terms of the percentage that they've provided versus percentage they've asked to provide in fee in lieu. And it was intentionally paired with the limit and the fee in lieu option to limit that to smaller sites so that we would have fewer instances of the fee in lieu, and we'd be getting it done on site, which was the original intent. But there's nothing magic about that. This is still, in general, more than other jurisdictions require. It brings the commercial space requirement in line with, or close to in line with what other jurisdictions require.
So for fee in lieu, where the amount required is less than 3,000 square feet, that prohibits larger development from using portions of their outdoor space as fee in lieu, such as in this Exhibit 3 that we were provided, that would not be allowed under if the required amount is less than 3,000.
Yeah, and I guess the hope there would be that with the reduced requirement, they could modify their site plan to provide it. Whether we've hit that or not, we will require some additional analysis.
Right. So I feel like nailing down the percentage of current amounts is more important than looking at fee in lieu right off the bat. It's more important if we're looking to see who needs to contribute to the public outdoor space and try and get a feel for which developments are going to have the biggest impact on that. I feel like that's something that we should be figuring out first and then going to fee in lieu as the alternative rather than comparing them, like updating them both at the same time simultaneously. because like you just said, if we start limiting fee in lieu and putting specific requirements on fee in lieu at the same time as minimizing the total amount of public space, or if we limit fee in lieu options to certain sizes of development, then we're changing two variables at the same time, and we don't really know how that's going to kind of get. Does that make sense? Like,
No, I understand.
we're changing too many things at the same time. We need to see how one variable shift changes the outcome of the of this public outdoor space. So I'm hesitant to restrict and put a lot of options on fee in lieu without knowing what the impact is going to be of reduction in public outdoor space.
If I could ask a follow-up question, but are you, do you have a particular feeling one way or the other about having some sort of a limit on fee in lieu? Understanding we don't necessarily know what that size threshold would be at this point, but is that something that, that the commission would like us to look at?
I don't speak for the commission, but I feel that up to a certain amount of square footage of fee in lieu would be okay, and it would allow large development to take advantage of the fee in lieu up to a certain portion.
Okay.
But also for small development that falls entirely within that portion would be able to take on the fee in lieu as well.
Okay.
So it's less limiting than saying if you have a threshold of 3,000 and less, that restricts the larger development from taking advantage of some of that fee in lieu, but we also bring into the, like, what is the fee in lieu going towards? So it's hard to make decisions and hard to kind of evaluate what this is actually even going to go for, so, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And along that same line, if we're reducing the requirement by, down to 60%, so from 150 to 90 on residential, we're increasing the number of units or the developments that'll qualify for fee in lieu, right? Because at 150 square feet,
Correct.
up to 3,000, we're at 20 units. We're going to be over 30 unit developments that would qualify for fee in lieu. And we really haven't come up with a good plan for fee in lieu. So I'd be, if we're going to reduce everything down to 60% level, I would reduce the 3,000 fee in lieu down, if not further, or do something similar to what Commissioner Curd said and have some type of structured fee in lieu. It just doesn't make sense to me to do something that we don't even know how to use the money, and it's not being utilized now. And it's not clear to a developer what that cost is going to be. It's an uncertainty. And we've had a letter here that says that makes a project difficult when they don't know what that is. So it just seems like trouble to me.
Commissioner Peiser, do you have any comments on with regards to the reduction, public space required or fee in lieu?
Yeah, the thing I'm trying to wrap my hands around is this public space is on the ground level for the most part, right?
It doesn't necessarily have to be on the ground level.
So I look at a footprint of a piece of property, and if you're going 3 stories up, you're adding, you're basically saying you have to have more open space on the outside because you're going up versus saying, okay, let's just look at the property itself. What can you use around this facility and say, okay, take a footprint and say, base it on this more the square footage of the lot versus saying per unit, if that makes sense. To where if you're carving out spaces in a property just to make open space because you have 90 units and 150 square foot per unit to make up, I just think that doesn't work in the long haul. Where if you take a piece of property and say I want to put public open space on this corner, now granted it's only 500 square feet, but it's gonna be really cool and useful and stuff like that. So that might get into changing way too much stuff, but I do think 10,000 foot view that these amendments need to be looked at.
And I think the reason for that, tying it to that, to the units, has to do with the density of the number of people that you're introducing to the area. So we're trying to create spaces that help to break up that increased intensity and density of development. So the relationship is the more people you're putting into an area, the more of that open space that you would need.
I understand that rationale, and this might not be a popular thing to say right now, but I think that there's plenty of space for more people in downtown Bothell and the areas around it. Our parks are nearly empty almost every day. The sidewalks, these public spaces we have are not being used. If anything, people complain about traffic and parking, which is a different topic, but I think there's plenty of room for people to walk around and find places to recreate.
I'm still kind of thinking all this over. I don't know where I stand. It's always hard to kind of reduce a public space requirement. And maybe we're getting a lot more, maybe we're making developments happen quicker. And maybe we're getting more units. Maybe those units are more affordable. I hope so. So yeah, I'm still just kind of thinking about it, but I think you've gotten a kind of a direction with regards to where the commission's at. I just, sometimes when we're reducing requirements, there's part of me that's just questions, I know maybe that's because our original requirements were too strict and too large, but I don't know if it's interesting to just kind of all of a sudden just decrease the public space requirements by, nearly, I don't know, 35 to 40%. And not get anything back with this, except for maybe more quicker development, more units, maybe more affordable units. Those things, I don't know if they're necessarily true or they are true, but I don't know. So I'm still thinking about it. But I think you've heard what the other people on the commission are thinking. There's some kind of varying thoughts on it. So
One other, just to further respond to the question about applying the limit to units versus area, that we can look into further is, in a way, that does hit projects with smaller units harder than projects with larger units. One reason that the townhouse developments have an easier time meeting the requirement is that those are large units, so they're 1,500 square foot units, and they have to provide 150 square feet for that, where if in in an apartment building that could be triple that. So that's something that we definitely can look at, and some of the other jurisdictions do base it on gross residential square footage rather than number of units. So that's definitely worth looking at.
And I guess just to clarify my very convoluted comment, is that at a point in time like this, when we're deciding to basically decrease a requirement to spur some development growth and make it pencil out more, I feel like this might be a little bit of lost opportunity for more affordable housing. You might say that maybe this does create more affordable housing because it's creating more units, but I don't know if that's the case or if it's more market rate housing. I guess I'm not an expert in that realm, but I think you know what I'm getting at. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I would say that this will apply across the board. So it'll make affordable housing projects pencil easier, and it'll also provide the same benefit for market rate housing.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Okay, I think we've covered everything on this, unless the commissioners have any other questions.
Just one note for the
Director.
record that the public hearing is continued to November 6th.
Okay. And that's all we need to say right there? Is
I think so. I don't think
Okay,
you
great.
need a motion on that.
Okay,
Just want
great.
to make sure that's on the record.
Okay. I don't think we need a break. I think we'll just go right back. We'll just go ahead and dive right into the study session, Plan Commission bylaws.
Well, I was going to keep this very brief, but given Commissioner Hampton's comment, I think I may try to drag it out a little bit longer just to.
You're always there for me.
Actually, I do think it should be fairly brief. So this is something that has come up before with the commission. periodically, it's a good idea just to revisit the bylaws, do some updating. There have been some changes. So what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through a few things that I've noted and see if there are other things that the commission would like staff to take a closer look at in terms of what's in the bylaws. So you received a copy in your packet. There are several just minor edits, corrections that I've noted. There are only a few substantive changes that I'm suggesting for your consideration. We don't have a particular schedule for bringing this back to the commission. So it's not on a tight timeline or anything like that. I want to give you some time to think it through. So some of the substantive changes that looking at starting on Article 4. Currently, there are 3 officers that are elected in even-numbered years. The chair, the vice chair pro tem, the chair pro tem, and executive secretary. These are somewhat antiquated terms and positions because we don't have the secretary do the minutes anymore, which is one of the responsibilities of the executive secretary. So one of the suggestions there would be to change the term from chair pro tem to vice chair and eliminate the executive secretary position. So you would have 2 elected positions, a chair and a vice chair. Specify that the elections occur in the first meeting in May in even-numbered years, which is, I went back and looked, the last time you had them was in 2018. In section 4, just a correction there to fill the unexpired rather than unexplored term. I guess it would be unexplored if they're not going to be on the commission for that portion of time. Other changes just reflecting the changes in the offices that we've talked about. Under Article 6, meetings. We are currently meeting on the first and third Wednesdays of each month rather than the first 4 Wednesdays of each month. So that would be a change to reflect those 2 set meeting dates. That does not preclude the opportunity for the commission to meet on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays, or even a 5th Wednesday if you so desired. Those would fall under the special meetings, and those can be called by the chair or any 3 members of the commission. So that part does not change. Under section 4, voting, just adding a statement that vote by proxy is not allowed. There's no mention of that right now, but just to be clear about that, because every organization I've ever been involved in, that question always comes up. Under the order of the agenda, number 3, just to clarify, to reflect what we currently put on the agenda, which is, it's not for non-agenda items, but it's for items that are not a public hearing that evening. So you can take comments on anything on the agenda other than public hearing items. Those really need to occur during the public hearing portion. And then under 7, just adding reports from council liaison to the other reports of members and commissioners. Keeping the public hearing procedures as they are. We don't follow those precisely, but I think that's good information and something that would help us stay on track. Article 8, no changes, but I noted we're supposed to have a copy here, so I brought one for us. I will bring that to every meeting just to make sure we're in compliance with the bylaws. Article 9 on committees. The chair from time to time may establish, I added the word ad hoc committees so that it's clear these are not standing committees that would be created by the chair. And then also added language to the end of that paragraph that the committees would terminate upon submittal of a final report to the commission unless a majority of the commissioners voted to extend the committee. So just to make sure that these sunset after a certain period of time, that we don't end up with a lot of ad hoc committees just sort of hanging out there, not sure what their purpose or role is. And that any extension would specify the task and a new termination date for the committee not to exceed 6 months. So again, just putting some specificity in the bylaws about the creation of the committees. I don't know if the commission has ever created any committees, but that might be
Yeah, not
something
since I've been on, no.
Okay, might be something we would get into as we're getting into the comp plan update, for example. So that's all I had. Just some suggestions there. I'm not proposing any changes in terms of the absences, but I know that's an issue that has come up with the commission before, and I don't know if that's something that the commissioners want to.
Can you repeat that, Michael?
I said I'm not proposing any changes to Article 11 absences. But that is an issue I know that the commission has discussed in the past about whether to do something different in terms of excused versus unexcused or number of absences total. Maybe we're addressing that through the attendance sheet that we're keeping. But I just raised that because I know it's an issue that's come up before. The commission wants to do anything with that. So that's all I had, and what I'm asking for from the commission this evening is if there are any other areas, if there's anything that's missing from the bylaws that you think should be included, if there's anything in here that you think needs further clarification, or that you would like to be edited, amended, or deleted in any fashion.
This might be wrong, but Article 5, opportunity to gain, does gain need an E in it, or?
No, I'm going to fix that.
And as far as absences, I do feel like the language is a little unclear, but I'm not sure if that's really necessary to specify or not. I do think that the chart is helpful, so.
Is what specifically is unclear?
Like the number of unexcused, or number of excused absences, I don't know.
That is not addressed.
It's unclear.
That's
Wait, it says 3.
3 unexcused, but I think Commissioner Kurtz said excused
I see.
absences.
Oh, got it. Yeah. I think that might be where something, I hope we talk about it as a commission up
It's
here.
up to the commission.
I agree. I mean, life gets in the way, work gets in the way, school gets in the way with the kids, and you're not going to be able to make every meeting. I understand that, but if you blow it off and don't tell anybody, there's got to. I think that's addressed here. But were you thinking about unexcused or excused absences if you have a certain amount, even if you're excused? You want to add something there? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think I would, just because, and it doesn't have to be super harsh, but we've been kind of treading pretty thin here lately with, we've had a lot of meetings where we've had 4 people, and part of that's because we have a commissioner who's gone for a few months, and I don't know, just to maybe set expectations, I don't even know what that number would be, but I think it's worth maybe potentially putting in here if the commission thinks so.
Yeah, I think we've all volunteered for these roles and knowing what we're getting into, and you have to participate, and you can't just say, hey, work schedule does get in the way, but there are people that will show up and make an effort and be a good, productive member of the commission versus someone who maybe wants to get in here and has a lot of stuff going on. They're, excuse, but they haven't really done anything. I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yes.
Where there's a gray area, but I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what that number would be, but I'm open to any suggestions, and obviously we're just doing a study session tonight, so. But it may be worth, unless somebody has a comment on that, we can just kind of, discuss it at a different time.
It's really tough to discuss this because, if we have the roster in front of us and there's one person who's not here, but they also have the most absences this year. So it's difficult for me to, put my feedback and input on who, what that rule should be, because I don't want to feel like I'm throwing that commissioner under the bus. But I do feel like there should be an obligation that we're here more than 50% of the time. That's just my point of view. I understand, we all miss meetings. I've missed 3 meetings this year when I was traveling. But I don't know, just if we're having the conversation, I know that there were other candidates when I applied that didn't get the opportunity to serve the community. And I think that would be disingenuous to not respect their applications and have people miss, 8 or 9 of 13 meetings in a year. But again, I don't want it to sound like I'm throwing somebody on the bus, but if we're going to have a genuine conversation about it,
Yeah.
those are the facts.
I don't think you'd be,
I think you're spot on.
it's like, not naming names or anything like that. I think it's totally legitimate. In my mind, to talk about it and explore. That's what we're doing here, so I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what the number is. Maybe that's a 50%, maybe that's a a good one? I don't know, but we're just talking.
So in theory, at least, you have 24 meetings a year.
Right.
22. No August.
That's true. Thank you.
Oh, that's
22,
true.
right. No
no,
August
August,
meeting.
yeah.
Thank you.
So 22 a year.
Math is not my strong suit.
I just did a quick calculation. So that equates, for a bare quorum, we need 88 commissioner meetings a year,
Right.
Yeah,
which is a total of 57% of the potential.
I think
Yeah.
more than half. I mean, if you're missing 11 to 22,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, is that too high of a percentage, low?
We don't actually have 22 though.
No,
But theoretically.
Theoretically,
Yeah.
that's,
so,
You could have-
or just say half.
Yeah.
You know, I guess that's where I'm getting
don't know.
at. But the thing is, the important thing to remember is if you miss something, you're coming in really blind. I mean, you get emails of the agendas, but you're really coming into, if you're missing something in your, for the meeting before, you're making a decision, like, man, I missed something, you know, there's no continuity there either.
And also, what I'd want to phrase it in that it would never want to be, it's not like a shunning of somebody for this, it's just like, it would be a certain point where, I mean, I think it would just be, I guess this is not working out, you know, you're not be able to make it, that we need to give the opportunity to somebody else.
and I think if you do have.
It's no hard feelings one way, I mean,
Yeah, and I'm not advocating one way or the
No,
other.
yeah,
but I
yeah, I'm
think
not.
If you do have something in the bylaws that says, even if these are excused absences and you're missing half of the meetings, whether it's 10 or 11, whatever number you might want to put in there, then all of the commissioners, you know, existing and future commissioners are on notice. And they're going to know when they're approaching a point where they're missing a lot of meetings. And they can make a decision at that point whether they want to continue on the commission as well. So there's an expectation that's clear in the bylaws.
And sometimes, you know, Wednesdays maybe aren't a good day. You know, hey, if these were on Thursdays or Fridays, it'd be a lot better, you know, whatever it is. So, I mean, it's one of those things where.
but people know what day it is if they're getting, right, that's true.
Because it says here, you meet on, I mean, it's in the bylaws of. Oops, sorry.
First and third.
First, that Wednesdays, so.
Should it also note no August meetings in that same paragraph?
We can add that.
And I appreciate Commissioner Curry bringing this up because it's interesting because actually excused absences are, having chaired the commission for a while and having been on the commission before that, it's really all about the excused absences because rarely do we do an unexcused one. I mean, I don't even know if I've ever given an unexcused absence because it's pretty harsh, you know, like, and it's just all you have to do is say I can't make it, and you know it's an excused absence. So, so I'm glad we're exploring this. I don't even know. I mean, yeah, missing half the meeting seems like a very low bar. So, yeah.
You know, I think it would be fair to put together some type of number, but I don't think it's fair to retroactively hold somebody to it who wasn't aware of that standard. And I don't know when the commissioner who's had the most absences this year is going to be back from his extended work trip.
We'll be
But,
back in November.
okay, so maybe, you know, that's when the clock starts, or we don't hold anybody. I don't want somebody to be booted off the commission because of a decision that we make when they're not here, or that they didn't have the knowledge of ahead of time, so.
Well, and we could write it in such a way that it would be in a calendar year, so it
Okay.
wouldn't actually start until January of next year.
Okay, I would be in support of that. And then I suppose we would just have to come up with a reasonable number. And I think 50% is the lowest I would want to go. I would leave it to other commissioners to give input on that.
My little calculation, so if everybody only attended 60% of the meetings, then in theory, you could have a quorum at every meeting, so that's,
You're really, yeah, but but what you're saying is you're not punishing the people who are here the most often because you hopefully are all up here, you want to be here as much as we can to give input, but you're relying a lot on the people who are here all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. I mean, one
It's a
tip,
good starting point, I think. As far as the threshold, I think the 60% is a good starting point.
I would support that.
you should be here at 60% of the meetings or, okay.
And is that, so if we start this in January, and do we get to December and then look back, or is it per a 6-month period, or how do you, I mean,
It'd be for the calendar year.
okay. So you get to the end of December and,
Well, technically, if you missed the first, I don't say it's, I don't know what 60%.
Oh, okay, fair
or 22
enough, yeah.
is, but let's say it's
13.
13, thank you. Again, math is not my strong suit. So if you miss the first 13 meetings, you're out,
okay.
is how that would work under the bylaws. If based on what I'm hearing, the discussion from the commission.
I'm also open to a stronger number than that. I don't know.
By the same token, if you hit that number in November, then that would be when you would be off the commission.
And so the only problem I see with that, which I don't think we address in the bylaws, is then council has to have a special session to appoint a new committee, because then, or else we're down to 6, right?
Correct. You would either, yes, you'd either be working
that wouldn't help
shorthanded
us
the
out
rest
at all.
of the year, or,
Yeah.
well, I mean, by the other side of that argument is if the person isn't making the meetings anyway, are you really down that much more than you were before?
Fair point.
For reference, this is based on my quick count, the 13th meeting we've held this year. And we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more on the schedule. So we're on pace for 18 meetings unless we add some. There may be one here in December that's canceled. So it seems like a good bar, but it does seem like it may be too low also, or too high. I don't know. Maybe there's a different way to do it.
Oh, that 13's.
I mean, somebody would have to miss every single meeting we've had this entire year, and today would be the one that broke the straw.
And one of the things that we could do, can think about, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Commissioner Hanford, but like, there's a word that we could change. It could be like, grounds for recommendation by the commission to the city council to review that. It doesn't say we're basically say we recommend that you remove this member. It could be more of a, can you guys look at this and see if, I don't know. Maybe that's too wishy-washy and not clear-cut enough.
Maybe we could say so 13 out of 22 is 60%. I don't know if this is a fair way to do it, but you could say 13 meetings in a year or 60%, whichever is.
You wouldn't know the percentage until the end of the year.
Right, but at least you wouldn't have to suffer through it the next year. I don't know, I'm just trying to.
60% seems, I don't know, just, there's only, I mean, we should have people, I guess, I just feel like we should have people here that want to be here more than 60% of the time. But that's just my personal feeling. Or else we can find somebody else who will be here more often. But maybe that's too high of a bar for essentially an unpaid position, you know.
You get $100 a month.
Was that?
That's true. You do get.
I think
Essentially
there's
unpaid.
people that do, want to be here, and there's opportunities where, I have a job that frankly, I have to be on the road or I'm going to be out of town. That is what it is.
Right.
And I am going to have excuse that I can't make it to every meeting. That's just the way it is. It's not a fact I don't want to be here. So we have to watch out what we say. Say, well, if you don't want to be here, well, no, I want to be here, but maybe
Right.
this year my work schedule is freaky, and it was just an anomaly, and so.
Yeah.
I think the people that are on this commission want to be here. I mean, just hearing you guys,
Right.
talk and speak on issues in the last few months, I think we genuinely care. We want to be here, but we all understand as well that things get in the way and people can't make it.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of not caring. It's just
Okay.
priorities.
Would it be completely out of the realm of normal, or maybe I'm just crazy talk right now, but to have an alternative or two, or alternate or two, to where if somebody can't make it to the meeting, then that person stands in. So we would have 9 commissioners, but 7 were the core and then 2 were alternates.
You want to address that, Mr. Chair?
Well, I actually broached that subject earlier on, and it was not, I don't know how much I can get into it, but basically I broached that subject of having an alternate, and it was basically like, no, we need to, people are on the, basically people who want to be on the planning commission there, so we don't need to have that kind of
Okay.
fallback.
That was the reaction from the mayor.
Additionally, is any alternate going to be attending every meeting and up to date on all the things that
Fair enough.
And they would have to be in order
Yeah.
to be able to function. So it is something that we looked into, because it has come up in the past.
But so it's, okay.
Just spitballing a little bit here, just trying to.
No,
No,
come
yeah,
up with
so
that.
it
Why we're
sounds,
here.
but it sounds like up here, maybe there's a 60% of meetings, or maybe we should do, I don't know, if it's the percentage or what. And I would even be comfortable, I don't know if anybody else is, in basically changing Article 11 to make it a little less of a harsh word, to say, it wouldn't even be a recommendation from the commission. It would be basically, staff would see this percentage, and it would basically present it to council and basically say, this person didn't meet this threshold. Maybe this person needs to meet with you to kind of, he or she to state his case, or he or she to state his case. I don't know. We're just talking. But then again, maybe it's good just having a hard number, and then we just, the next year, another person comes on.
We could take out the recommendation from the commission and just make it an automatic, that in that instance, that name would automatically go to the council as, hey, this is, attendance has been an issue. And I agree with Commissioner Peistrup. I think, everybody wants to be here. I think all of
I
the
agree.
commissioners are.
I probably phrased it wrong earlier.
So I think the issue is conflicts, and we had this discussion with Commissioner Moreau Cook when he knew he was going to be gone for 3 months. And we talked about whether he needed to step down, or if we could continue, with him just on an excused absence basis. And hopefully that's something that will not occur too often for any commissioner, where they're going to be gone for 3 months straight. But that may happen from time to time, and that wouldn't necessarily disqualify them from being on the commission. But if we have something in here, from what I understand you're suggesting, Mr. Chair, is we put the thresholds in here, and then the commission doesn't have to take action, and I would say even the staff doesn't have to make a recommendation per se. It just comes to the attention of the council that this commissioner has been unable to attend meetings in an amount established by the commission as a minimum requirement. And the council then has the option of removing that commissioner. They could decide not to, or they could decide to replace that commissioner. But it would be up to the council to make that decision.
Yeah, that was just like, I was just throwing that out there. I don't know what everybody thinks of that.
Yeah, I think throw it in there.
Or if it's better to leave it as it is.
Whoever has the most absences buys his beers after.
But all joking aside, it's been we've been having a lot of meetings with the minimum amount of people, so it is something that I'm glad we're addressing. So with that, I think, I don't know if
We'll work on some language for that,
that'd be great.
and a number, somewhere between 50 and 60% is kind of what I'm hearing.
I would say minimum 60%.
I agree.
Isn't that what Dave came up with for quorum for everybody? I mean, that's 13 out of 22 meetings, and as I pointed out, we've only had 13 meetings through all of September, so we're 3/4 of the way through the year, and if
Oh,
you
so
miss-
is there
you
a
could
number
miss-
or percentage?
You could miss every one of those meetings that we've had, and today would be the day that you were effectively kicked off. To me, it's a lot of absences.
The commission could always take action before that. I mean, you could be proactive if that is happening and you.
No, it's
feel-
not about this year.
No, I understand that.
Oh,
And I'm not talking about any specific commissioners, and this is not directed at any individual that's on the commission currently. this is looking into the future. If you have, let's say you get a commissioner who's just not participating for whatever reason, may have a very legitimate reason, or they may just have decided they got on the commission, they're not really that into it, and they're not putting the effort into it. Even if they're showing up and not putting the effort into it, the commission would have the option of recommending to the council that, that they be removed or not reappointed. That's not
Yeah.
in here now, but that's,
That's in the book you brought.
no.
That would be a difficult
That's going a little
situation.
beyond, and I think that's something that that I've heard from the council liaison, and one of the reasons, I think that we're doing the attendance sheet is so that the council has more information about, participation in the commission. This is not the be-all, end-all, this is just one piece of information.
I think that it brings up a good point about accountability, but also how do we define success in being a commissioner? Is it the quality of comments that you make? Is it the number of comments that you make? Is it your attendance here? People are on the commission because of different reasons, and whether it's to be more involved or to listen or to engage with different issues that come to the city. We have to be mindful of the fact that people are here for different reasons, but collectively as a group, we're trying to make a difference. So I think that that's a challenge.
Yeah, and it's a busy world out there. People lead busy lives. It just gets busier and busier. So I appreciate it when every commissioner is here and can make as many meetings as they can. So I think we've given you good direction on that. I think you kind of know.
Anything else, feel free to just send me an email directly, and I'll continue to work on this and bring something back to you.
Great. And just not to belabor, to keep this going, but Article 5, which I kind of like the idea of it, the second paragraph, the chair to sole, maybe temporarily, that whole paragraph, it's very confusing if you read through it because you don't know who you're talking about as the chair, because you start talking about the chair shall be, it seems like you could, there's a few places in there where you could say the person serving temporarily as chair, and I don't know.
That would apply to whoever was serving as, no, I take that back.
But then it says like the chair shall be present at all times. Oh, wait, no. But the chair, so at the end, it says the chair shall be present at all times. But it's talking about the person who's actually the full-time chair, not the alternate chair.
Correct.
So it's a little bit confusing, but maybe that's as straightforward as it can be on there, so.
And that usually comes into play when the chair wants to participate more. If there are rules of, and this goes back to Robert's Rules of Orders, typically the chair does not participate as much in the discussion and does not make motions. So if the chair wants to engage in that, then
Right.
can hand the gavel off to somebody else to be the chair during
Got
that
it.
particular
Okay.
period. I think that's what that's, I'm not sure why it's titled the way that it is, but that's the circumstance that I'm familiar with where that
Great.
would happen.
Well, thanks, Michael, for bringing this forward.
Hopefully it wasn't too painful.
Do we have any old business?
Nope.
No.
Nope, okay. Reports from staff?
So just a reminder, the next meeting is October 2nd. Timely, we were just talking about absences. We have 3 commissioners that will be absent at that next meeting. So we'll send out a reminder to everybody for the 4 that are scheduled to be there. It's really critical that we have you there because we will have a public hearing on the comp plan amendments. We're down to 2 amendments. We had 3. We had the capital facilities plan to incorporate the fire station rebuilds, the bike plan, and the minimum density we're looking at for the RAC areas. The bike plan is not going to be ready, so that we're taking off of the plate for this year. We'll bring that back next year for amendments. So we'll be going forward with those 2, but that will be the public hearing, and we're looking for a recommendation from the commission that we can then take to the council. I think we do have possible continuation of that into the first meeting in November if necessary, if you need some more time. And that most likely be on the minimum density discussion, because that one's a little bit more complicated. And then also, we're going to be introducing a discussion with the commission on the multifamily tax exemption. This is something that's in the affordable housing strategy for the city that Mr. Boyd had worked on, and he'll be bringing that to you with Mike Stanger from Arch. The role for the commission in this, because this will not go into the zoning code per se, it's not under your purview in that sense, but the MFTE gets applied in just certain areas of the city, and that's the focus of what we'll be bringing to the commission. Is that's more of a land use type of discussion. So we'll have that information and discussion with you. We're not looking for a formal recommendation, but we will be looking for feedback that we will then take to the council when we have that discussion with them in a study session. And then the other thing I was just going to mention is I was at a conference last week for the Washington State Planning Directors. It's an annual conference over in Chelan. We have outside speakers that come in. These are planning directors from all over the state, city and county planning directors. We had about 90, 95 folks there. It's a very good conference. We get updates on legislative agendas, actions that are coming out of the Association of Washington Cities and the Washington State Association of Counties. Also, we get an update from an attorney on case law, decisions that have come down either the state or national level that affect the work that we do. Our primary guest speaker this year was Chuck Marone, who's with Strong Towns, and I know he was here the next day in Kenmore, and at least 2 council members were at that. They spoke about it on Tuesday night, so they had some very interesting and intriguing ideas on some things. So I would encourage you to check out the website. It's strongtowns.org, Strongtowns, all one word. And I know Commissioner Curd was there as well, so I'll let him talk some more about what was discussed by Mr. Marone. And that's all I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Reports from members.
As he just mentioned,
Yes, sorry, the Tacoma Conference. I'm sorry. Dave just reminded me, I forgot to mention the Tacoma Conference. So the October 16th meeting, just a reminder, we've canceled that. That's when the state chapter of the American Planning Association Conference is being held in Tacoma on the 16th and 17th. I think Commissioner Curd has indicated he's interested in going. So you'll be registering, and then we can reimburse you for your registration on that. If anyone else is interested in going, please let me know so that we can get that information, make sure that we can reimburse you for the registration. And then also, obviously, if we have 4 going, we need to do all our public notification for that. So thank you for the reminder. Dave skipped right over that. Sorry to interrupt, Commissioner Curd.
no problem. So the meeting in Kenmore was it last week? A little bit ago. It was really interesting. Chuck spoke a lot about financial sustainability in terms of planning and development. There's a strong emphasis on infill development, of which Bothell may lack a little. And there's some interesting points about density and kind of what goes into putting together a city of our size that can generate enough revenue to be supported long term. So it's really interesting. I do want to bring up the fact that the podcast, not Chuck's podcast, but Strongtown podcast, does feature, I think maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, does feature a developer from Bothell in an interview. And so it's an extended interview, and I think that was something that was enlightening, and I would encourage everyone else to maybe check it out. But it's on the Strong Towns webpage. So that's
Great, thank you. Any other reports from members? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
Oh, no, I can't make the motion. Can somebody make a motion? I'm
I
sorry.
make a motion to adjourn.
You have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.